Welcome to Inclusivity Unlocked, the podcast that's all about inclusion and diversity, brought to you by the association Explorator. And we're chatting with you from our studio in Craiova, and together we'll make sure the tricky isms and complex terms from the world of inclusion become a part of your everyday life. Okay, now it's time to unlock. Welcome to today's podcast episode. We will try to delve into the topic of museum accessibility with our special guest, Laura Tiparu, curator of the Craiova Museum of Art. And we will try to address inclusivity in museum. We'll be exploring several key areas, such as accessibility, representation and diversity, community engagement and education. Laura, thank you for being here with us.
Thank you also for inviting me.
And as a curator, could you share maybe with us your approach to promoting inclusivity in museums? Do you ensure that your projects are accessible to your audience while you're deciding on the topics?
Maybe it should be proper to let people know about the specificity of our museum. So we are an art museum, the single art museum in the town of Craiova. We are hosted by a landmark building in Craiova. Maybe you've seen it throughout your journeys in the city.
Yeah.
It is also central. It's a palace dating from the beginning of the 20th century and which belonged to a very rich person of that time. And our collections, the core of our collections, are inherited from the private collections of the rich people of this area, Oltenia area. So we are dealing with mostly Romanian art, beginning with the icons, let's say 17th century, and Romanian art throughout the centuries until the 20th century. And in the last years, we also collected and exhibited contemporary work. Also, 2 years ago, we inaugurated a new building, which is in the courtyard of the museum, a space, a contemporary designed by a very well-known Romanian architect, which is also the building. The conception of the building is a tribute to Constantin Brâncuș, one of the most known and the universal known name in the domain of sculpture. So there is the place which mostly hosts this contemporary exhibition, but also the old building too at the floor ground. Maybe the most important collection that we have is that of some works of Constantin Brâncuș. So this is our domain, our field of activity, and our activities refer not strictly but mostly with this kind of art. And every communication act, be it written or visual, is almost every time addressing a particular public and an audience. And of course we aim for the general audience, but of course throughout our exhibition and our events we have situations and cases and events which are designed for kind of a special audience. Let it be children, let it be students of various ages, or people. Sometimes we just want to connect, let's say, the members of our community, the public, with the newest development in art, in contemporary art, of course, from a professional point of view, because as you know, museums do not deal with amateur art or something like this. Not being a gallery, it's not our purpose to launch artists, but to celebrate professionists. So, of course, we are building and designing our exhibition using, of course, our heritage, our collections, of course, lending, but in a collaboration with our collections.
But being a traditional museum, it seems that it's really hard sometimes to engage the audience, because museums sometimes seems, especially classical museums, seems like something egalitarian, like something that's hard to access as a young person, because it seems like a world of those who already know everything in art, and you as a young person sometimes know nothing, and it's might be hard to go through one place to another.
That's why we have all these educational programs in which we engaged. These are maybe, let's say, micro exhibition, targeting, let's say, 19th century photography of children, and make a comparison with the children today and the childhood as it was perceived then, and what it looks like today. We have also engaged in some programs like in Romanian it's Eu la muzeu, which means I go into the museum, I'm in the museum, which was developed in order to facilitate accessing the museum and to our collection to all the children which come from let's say a background with less opportunities than the urban ones. So also, if you take into consideration the fact that the entrance is free for the children until 18th
years old.
Years old, yeah. So it's not a bit scary, because the children get used to coming to a museum since they are in school, and maybe even earlier with their parents. And we also have guided tours which are designed and constructed and uttered especially for this kind of audience, because you can have the same vocabulary and a range of discussion with children as with adults. So we try to cope with this kind of requests, so children don't feel estranged when they come to the museum.
Yeah, and the program you described, it kind of helps for children from rural areas to come to the city.
From the county of Dolj, so everybody. So they get turns. So the 3 months is for this part of the villages. This, we are throughout the years have this problem.
And there are special tours for them.
Yes, they have special tours, and me and my colleagues are guiding them and make them acquaintance with our museum.
And children from schools, they have like special hours then they attend the museum?
We didn't design special hours for. They are welcomed at every hour, and also professors are often invited to keep some classes there, or also to call for help in order to help them in order to explain them some notions or something that help them explain for some terms, or maybe some works of art for the children.
And I really like about the Brancusi Center that it gives voice to really young artists.
Yeah.
Because as far as I remember, the Paysage exhibition, there was students from Bucharest.
They were graduates from the University of Art, the Department for Photography and Video Productions. So we displayed their works, their let's say their finished works of when they finished school. So. This is a way of promoting them, or of showing them their productions to the people, and it's important for every community to see what is the art production in our society today. So.
But in general, about Romania, do you think that the topic of inclusion is an important one and people discuss it?
Inclusion, like you mean disabilities or something like this? Every museal institution in Romania took some measure in the last years to facilitate their access. I mean, we also still we are an architectural monument, the place, and still after the works of restoration and renovations, we built inside an elevator for these people to access also the first level of our exhibition. So in this case, for the motoric disabilities, we have these kind of facilities, and also, which I can also say, is that we have programs that include other categories which are less less sympathized by. I mean, we also arranged visits for the inmates of the juvenile penitentiary. You know, we have juvenile delinquents, and there is a penitentiary for them in Craiova, so they can come also and visit the museum, of course ensuring special measures of security and stuff. So it's kind of an inclusion, let's say. Why not?
I'm impressed because I haven't noticed actually elevator in the museum.
Yeah, because it's not so frontal. Because you know, you can't build it in the center of the building, but it is, and it functions, and it serves to this purpose. Of course, we have our. You know, we are forbidden, even in what exhibition is concerned, to affect the walls and everything around it. Yeah, so we have some difficulties even in our in building our own exhibition in order to respect these kind of restrictions. But we thought of this kind of help, and it was designed in order to respect and to comply to the conditions requested for this.
So actually all the time you're like considering, so it's part of the program of the museum to ensure that people with disabilities on wheelchairs, for example, that they have access.
Yeah.
And also you're thinking about guided tours, which is like another intellectual, more
approach
way of accessibility in another way. And but do you write maybe some like easy read texts, you know, like the
for
adapted
the use
texts?
of we are currently working at some audio guides, which are some of them are designed for children and some of them for adults, and we also have as a purpose not to have a very, very difficult language to understand, because we believe also that even the most abstract or complicated things can be made easily understandable through the language, using the adequate language. So
sometimes curators, they're just, at least in the country I come from, they play with words to make it sound very sophisticated, to show how many diverse words they know, but in reality sometimes you just need a couple of really good written lines to give the main idea, and after that
it's a temptation, you know, it's a temptation, because when you have such a great domain and such a sophisticated domain, sometimes it requires sophisticated language, but you know, it is designed among the specialists, the ones that embrace this domain from another point of view, not of the larger public, which is interested in perceiving art. You know, one of the most complicated issue in our activity is maybe to make people understand the context of these works, you know, when they were created, why were they like this, and this is very interesting for them, because when you explain to them why, for example, Brâncuș was such a revolutionary artist of that time, they begin to understand, because in an era like this, in the contemporary society where image is everything and image has so myriads of aspects, one particular image, like a sculpture of Brâncuș may not rise too much interest, but it should when you contextualize it. So it's important, and it is part of our job to do that.
We need to step back and understand how people from that age perceived it, not how
we perceive, because it can say nothing. It may say nothing to us now.
We have a lot of abstraction works, and for us it's just another usual, but going back then, no one could understand why he's doing keys no shape of rock.
And from my point of view, this is the real inclusivity. When you make people understand the fact, the objects that they see, and they become very interested then, because sometimes it's very funny to make especially children understand that the world was not created with them. They were not in the beginning of the world, so.
I remember, I think, when I also was maybe even a teenager, I had this concept contemporary art is very cool because it's contemporary, and what was done before, it's that old and not that interesting.
Which does not matter anymore.
Because it's not connected with reality at all. But with time, I got to understand that actually there are sometimes much more concept in
back then than now.
And just harder for us to understand, but it doesn't mean that those people been more stupid or they didn't
or less talented or something less imaginative. No, their imaginary world was often richer than ours, because we've seen so much things that our minds it becomes crowded with everything. So the possibility of create something new become less and less probable than there. Or maybe you could be placed in the situation to discover something that was already discovered, which is kind of another definition of ignorance. So
being not in the capital, do you feel that you don't have that much resources in providing people with inclusion as in Bucharest, for example?
To give access, you mean technology?
Technology as well, or I don't know, VR, for example, if it's needed, or specialists who can train, because training is also important. Just we all the time talk about inclusion, but just a few people understand what it means and how to implement it inside of the work in the museum.
Yeah, because there is the risk to reduce it to a kind of vocabulary and empty words, not really the stuff you really need to do. Because our interest is, of course, to let more and more people come and be interested and appreciate the heritage that is displayed and also kept there. The museums are like a place of the muses, let's say. These muses are the daughters of the memory goddess, so we need to remember. We cannot live in a world like it was empty, and now what we see now and what we see in our day-to-day life, it's all. This is not all, and we need to make people more interested in what we have, the other centuries had to offer to us. Your question was about the resources. Of course, we don't have the same kind of resources that maybe Bucharest or other places have, and of course we would like more, but we are trying to do our best with what we have and to adapt it to our community, of course, because when also the community is a little bit like ours, if you have this mind resource, you can create or events or some things that should trigger the interest, and the VR, we had something like this when we launched the Brâncuș Center, the possibility to have this kind of experience regarding the works of art. But you know, it is for our kind of museum, the materiality of the stuff is very important. So you cannot change this and switch it to VR, or because VR is everywhere now.
Yeah.
Maybe the museum should be some places where the VR
where
should not find their place for it, because you need to not to touch the works of art, of course, but have a direct contact with the object itself. Because otherwise we've seen it through our phones, through our, I mean, it's an explosion of this kind of stuff. Let the museums be something, I mean, for our domain. There are, of course, museums in which the touching part and the direct experience of some phenomena is required for such technology, but not in our case so much. Not so much like, in our case.
But do you try to do maybe touchable models?
Yeah, we try. There was also a project like this, touchable models, like to have some, let's say,
paintings,
some copies.
Yeah.
And we have promotional stuff of the images, which are imprinted images from our collections. If that's what you meant, or
yeah, like sometimes in museums you have copies of artworks that you can touch, like blind people can touch to like be closer to understand what's the image is about on the painting.
There was a project to have some 3D printing of some works, and it was done like an experiment, but the project was not finalized, and we don't have such products for sale. Maybe it's, of course, because we don't have so many sculptures, for example, because these are the objects that we can touch. And also there are, in our case, there is another problem. Let's say we have these works of Brâncuș, which would be very interested to make a copy in 3Ds. But there is an organization, which is, maybe you've heard of it, it's Vizarta, its name, which controls the copywriting for this kind of activity, or any reproduction of any kind of Brâncuș's work. We have to pay a very, very consistent fee in order to make a copy and sell this kind. Even for a picture of a work, if you want to introduce it in a catalog or in an album or something like a publication, you have to pay a fee for it. So we don't have such kind of resources, financial resources.
Yeah. But I think what's incredible about the museum is that the access to Brâncuș Center is free.
Yeah.
And the fee for, I'm not sure about the adult, but I think it's like 15 lei.
Yeah, like the equivalent of 3 euros. Yeah. Like, this is maximum.
Which is incredible price, and for students even lower.
Yeah.
So in this way, it's totally...
Anyway, students over 18 years old have also a low cost ticket, discounted ticket. So the price, it's not a problem in order to access the museum.
Yeah, the interest should be there.
Yeah. The interest is...
Yeah. But as NGO, we really understand how it's hard sometimes to engage people and to make them come and like to see the space as welcoming.
Yeah, we try our best, even announcing our events in the mass media or in this online application and in social media, of course. We sometimes try to make them more interested. Sometimes we trigger some schools or maybe some high schools, and we are talk to them and say maybe this should be of interest for your students, so they come to see it. Of course, people now now they are discovering in the last years this event of the Nights of the Museum. So
it's been recently, right?
Yeah, it's been recently, but this is not a very popular event among among the staff of the museum, because when the crowd is big and when people, it's very hard to manage this kind of affiliation, you know.
And I think I heard somewhere in the news that maybe in England some workers in the museum, they kind of were against making the night of the museum because they haven't been paid for doing extra hours.
Yeah, these are of course also extra hours, but sometimes we feel that our collections and our display are in danger. You know, we engage voluntary, so students and young people in order to help us manage this kind of events. So it's not an easy one to organize and also to manage.
Yeah, you also
throughout the night
have to think about like the space, because everything is very narrow.
Yeah, there are narrow spaces. Yes, not all of them are narrow, but some are. And people do not behave properly all the time, and also the majority of our works are not protected, are not super protected by walls or glass or something like this. So they are very reachable, very so they are very exposed, let's say. So such events are not easy to manage.
Yeah, but here I think we come to a question of how to make it at the same time people behave, but make them feel that museum is very free. Like contemporary art, at least institution that build new spaces, they're doing them bigger, of course, which I think gives them more opportunities to do workshops or some tours. But at the same time, they try to just show that you can behave as you want. So what is like right
so
behavior?
So it's a discrepancy, you know. Every museum has its own particularities, and of course when it's about performative art, like the visual arts have become in the late years, the public is often asked to participate in the experience, but of course we have to understand that not all art is like this, because works of art of a matter like wood or canvas, and they require another kind of contemplation, let's say. It requires contemplation, not participation, you know, it's a difference. So people generally understand this. Of course there are exceptions like in other
So the
cities.
The main thing that you ask for is like not to touch,
because not to touch, and keep a right distance in order to see it better, and also not to endanger the object,
because it's valuable.
This is it's valuable, it's unique, it's nothing that we can replace it with. So this is a part of, it's a value, it's inbuilt value, that it's irreparable. It's nothing like you can put something else in its place.
I wanted to ask about this decolonization topic. Contemporary museums, from time to time, they try to put those authors who been neglected to the first walls, to the main walls, and sometimes put like, for example, with women artists. It also became a theme because women's voice never been heard. And now Gentileschi. Artemisia.
The now famous, obscured Baroque painter, which was obscured for a while, a very long while. Yeah, but we don't have such examples. Our women artists were kind of manifesting themselves at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th.
Like
but
with
they
Impressionists, like in this movement?
No, later.
Later
Than Impressionists, because Impressionists was in the 70s, yeah. Let's say that the Romanian feminine artists manifested themselves in the beginning of the 20th century. So, due to our kind of society, which was for most of the time a kind of Oriental one, in which the woman was not in the center of the society, and her duties were mostly tied to the house and the keeping of the house and of the family, and also the fact that in our society the poor people constituted the majority, but it's kind of the same with Russia. Let's say our women artists began to take a place in the art world when they were sent to study abroad, let's say. So,
like France.
Like in France, yeah. There was a community of young artists there, which included also women, and also in domain which would seem unpredictable, like sculpture for women. So we had some very, very important sculptresses. Some of them worked, and also emulated Brâncuș and his studio in Paris. There were some dancers which were famous in Paris in that time. There were also some architects which were connected to the Royal Romanian court, like I could name Henrietta de la Vrancea, which was the preferred architect of Queen Mary of Romania. So I can't say that Romanian society defavorized or put down women
so at some
artists.
point they got the voice.
Yeah. They got the voice when they were interested in having one in this domain. They were not put down at all.
But maybe some artists from minorities, is it even possible to talk about this? Like from Roma community, some artists?
We have now a Roma origin artist, which is very much on the wave in Romania. I don't know if you heard of him. His name is Eugen Raportoru. Maybe you should look for it.
Yes,
so he is exhibited nowadays in the Museum of National Contemporary Art in Bucharest. So this was yeah, I understand your question, but I don't know if you know, but Craiova, it was a very heteroclite society and community. It comprises several nations and let's say races, as they are called now, which lived together in quite a bit of harmony most of the time. So here were the Romanians, were Albanians, were Bulgarian, were Greeks, were Romanian, were Jews, were also Roma. But maybe you don't know from our history, but Roma was an enslaved category, social category, since after the middle of the 19th century. They were freed after that, and it was, of course, a kind of shocking event for them. But what in arts, and they were maybe the most valued musician in our society, and also that today music is very influenced by them. So they were never shut down, they were never put down. Race, origin, and this was not a problem for us. At least here in Romania, from what I know and my experience.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
Maybe I would like to add something. I think it's important, and maybe today there are not so many people which say this, but for me, as an artist, let's say, it would be a little bit demeaning to appeal to my origin in order to facilitate my access in the art world, because the language of art is universal from my point of view, and from the artist's point of view, because he's not directed his art to his community. It's not an exclusive language, you know. When an artist makes art, it doesn't think of an audience which is so little as the community from which it came. Art is a universal language. That's why we can appreciate it, whatever country it's about and the time of history, because art is has universal human dimensions. So appealing to this kind of problem, let's say, maybe in other society they have this problem, but not here.
But it seems just that it's sometimes really hard to have the access, for example, for contemporary galleries to show your art, because all artists, I believe so at least, they want to show it and show it in a proper place, in a proper space, and sometimes you can't get this access.
Do you think galleries ask you if you are...
But you need at least, I don't know, money to try to do art using proper materials, or have access, which is also about your education.
Yeah, but these kind of problems do not are not specific to just one category or some categories, because you know the poor ones. I mean, the poor artists. No, it's not. Well formulated. The artists are poor, generally poor in Romanian society, and I think everywhere they have scarce resources. Everyone, because you know, and it was with some exception in history. I mean, the original art, the art with a big A, with a capital A, was coming from people which were bohemians, were artists and were poor. And they were not doing it because they have the resource to do it or the money to do it.
Depending on the king you're working for.
No, these were some exceptions. Think of Brâncuș. He was not a very poor guy. He was not a minority. He was nothing, but he was very poor. He went to Paris, from Bucharest to Paris, with some scarce meaning, walking, taking the cart, taking the train, it was very hard until he came to sell his work. It was the meaning of his existence were very scarce, and he also worked in some restaurants. He also helped the clergy in some church with the liturgy, and also got some scholarships from Romania and some from some friends. So the financial meanings of the artists, to begin with, are never...
Yeah, and through their history they needed to collaborate or work for a church, but at first it was like orders in European art, mostly for the church, and then
they have to have orders.
Yeah, orders.
Yeah, so they were ordered and they were paid for it, but also for these orders, not everybody qualified for those orders. They got chosen based on their talent, on their expression, also they were chosen also if the expression met the requirements, the ideological requirements of the commander, of the commandator of the work. So it was a collaboration also.
Yeah. Going to a little bit another issue inside of this accessibility topic, can we talk maybe a little bit about the employment? Because I'm interested how open this traditional institution is for young workers. Are there those who are really interested to work inside of the museum nowadays?
You know, museums are not very, very, let's say, desirable places to work, because we don't earn too much. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if you noticed, but the youngsters nowadays are very very demanding in what the payment is matters, you know.
Yeah, no one will work if someone not paying.
Yeah, not. It's not about not paying enough. I mean, they have some expectations which often do not match their
skills. Yep, it's also
and
true.
also, and it is one aspect. The other aspect is that the salaries and the wages in these domains are not very high.
Yeah, because it's also usually governmental work and like teacher work and.
Yeah, you know, when the budget is low, the budget for culture is lower. So this is the. But of course, young people are encouraged to come. I have also quite young colleagues which joined us a few years ago. So the museum is not the place for all people. Or
But is in Romania it's a thing to shame those who don't have art history degree, for example, if they go to classical institution? Because I noticed it from my experience that if you, for example, come from different sphere, you won't be welcomed, even though you wanna show everything you have, show like your administrative skills.
You know, museums discovered in Romania, or in our case, let's talk about the case that I'm familiar with. I come from a different background than art. It was a later specialization, but my main background is philology, is literature and foreign languages, and the museum needed my expertise. Of course, it was doubled, it was matched with my interest for the domain, and my educating process until then, and the things that I learned after I was. But the museum also need people who can present the stuff, which have words to do it, and a capacity of putting these works of art in a special light needed for the public. So we are not nowadays perceived with
like discrimination in some way.
Yeah, you know, when you don't come from that special field, it's easier. Yeah, and I know I'm a stranger for some. I don't know techniques. I don't know all the techniques of painting, of sculpting. I mean, I know, but not in a kind of experiencing it. So I'm not an artist, but I can talk about what I understand about art, and I know about art.
Yeah, vocabulary is totally needed when you write something.
Yeah. It's not when you need to do a presentation, written or oral. You need to know how to express yourself. So we are needed.
Maybe we can also discuss a little bit about good examples, if you ever experience of museum that felt for you very inclusive, like where you felt welcomed in some way.
Yeah, but my experience is biased. It's biased because I work in a museum, and this is kind of a familiar place for me. The general rules, I know the general rules. I know my site. I mean, I'm looking for things. Not like the general public, not because I'm a very big specialist or something, but I'm looking of, let's say solutions to place an etiquette in an elegant, and though not involving the monumental wall that I mean, solutions that the other museum finds in the tryings of the specific, you know.
And you consider like how you can implement it in
yeah,
your
what
own
can
creations.
I do? What, like this kind of good examples, like I mean when I'm looking at a leaflet or something like this, and I see something that I like, and I mean not copy but inspire, they can, so they are places for inspiration for me, of course, of joy, of seeing really seeing masterpieces of the universal art. I also like very much the idea that a museum like Victoria and Albert, putting aside their vast collection of art from different domain of art, made this big and very, very, very nice exhibition of David Bowie some years ago. And of course, David Bowie was an artist, was a real artist, but not an usual kind of visual artist. And they dedicated this big exhibition, which was a grand success. And I understand why, because everybody, I mean...
because the name itself.
The name and then the character and how many fans he had and how many... he impacted through his music, and not only music, because he added so much to it.
Yeah.
So I was impressed that somebody like that, which was not kind of classic kind of artist, and the art was about himself, not something that but he visually also created. He had a saying in his costume, in scenography and everything which surrounded him. So it was an artist, and it was displayed as such in a museum.
Thank you very much for this conversation. It was very fulfilling and I'm not so energized right now. Yeah, thank you very much for coming. And it was Inclusivity Unlocked podcast. Thank you for watching, and see you next time to unlock the new topic.